Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. Have you heard the term sparketing? I hadn't before today, but I am excited for today's conversation because we are going to be talking about modern marketing. And I've got with me today Scott Murray. He's the co author of the most amazing marketing book ever by Mark Schaefer and Friends. He also has 20 plus years in content marketing. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you and your audience.
So, Scott, I'm just going to ask you the question that I'm sure everybody's just thinking because what is sparketing?
Yes, that's a great question, and I hope a lot of people are going to be asking that question. Really, what Sparketing it's a way for marketers to find an easier path to, like you said, evolving into modern marketing. We're in an era now where marketing, which is kind of rooted in words like sell and promote, which is driving away consumers. We're now in an era of where we need to have two-way communication with them. We need to spark engagement. We need to spark trust. We need to spark response, relationship, all the things we're hearing. And I think by calling what we're doing sparketing and focusing on sparking something meaningful with that connection with the consumer already puts us in a much better mindset than when we think in terms of marketing, which kind of automatically, just by habituation, has us thinking promote and sell, and we lose that other component of what's important in modern marketing.
Mm, love it. I love how you have shifted it around because you're right. Like when you do think of marketing, it's advertising, it's getting your message out there. It's you know, getting people ready to buy, like those words, buy, right? And I don't know how many messages we get each day. I think it's thousands of advertising messages that we get each day. I mean, I know if you're watching this on YouTube, like there's constant ads on YouTube. So I like that concept of getting away from marketing to sparketing. That is
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, if you think about YouTube, for example, I mean, that's a great example because what are people willing to do to avoid those ads? Pay YouTube money. What else do you need to know about people's attitude regarding ads? They are willing to pay money so they don't have to see them. And I'm one of those people that I take it a step further and I talk a lot about, the mindset of the consumer because we're all consumers. And when marketers remember they're consumers, they realize that, there's a lot of strategies they're creating that are almost counterproductive. Because I'm one of those people that I'm like, well, on the one hand, I don't want to see ads, but on the other hand, I don't want to pay. So what I do is if there's going to be a long ad, my consumer brain goes, okay, if you're going to force this ad on me, I'm just going to minimize it until my content comes up just to prove you can't make me watch this ad. And I'm sure there's lots of other consumers with similar mindset. And I know there are because as a content marketer, I've had to break some of those barriers where I know past experiences and attitudes towards ads are something that I had to take into consideration when I created content over my career.
Excuse me. It's funny. Sometimes if I'm really annoyed at ads, especially on YouTube, I let them run the whole ad because what people don't know is if you cut out right where it says skip ad, there's
Hmm.
really no charges to the person who puts the ad up. But the
Ah,
longer you watch, the more they pay. So the really bad ads.
wow.
I know
All
it's a
right.
little,
But
and I don't do it all the time. It's just every once in a while if I'm really annoyed, I'm like, I'm just gonna let this thing run through.
that's human nature, isn't it? What you can only take so much, and then you have to fight back a little bit.
Yeah, because like you, I refuse to pay for no
Yeah,
no ads. It's not it's not worth the money to me. And I know for some people it is, and if that makes your life easier, it's there. But for me, it's like
yeah.
I can
The
take 30
irony
seconds
is,
to do something else.
yeah, no, and there's probably something we can do. The irony is, nowadays there's a growing discussion of just old things marketers used to do, that we have to stop doing because we have to think about the consumer experience. And one of
Yes.
those things is gated content, whether that's a good
Mm.
idea anymore, whether or not you can really offer something that's worth putting your information in. And I want to say, I read a study a few weeks ago that talked about the extent people will go to avoid ads. And it really broke it into all these areas of things they're willing to do. And it wasn't just pay money, they were willing to give personal information up if it meant getting to avoid ads. And it was like stuff that, typically if you were filling it out just to get something, you might be like, hey, I don't, they don't need this. But they're like, is that what I have to do to avoid ads? Yes, here's my address, phone number, and all this other information, just so
Oh,
I don't have to see ads. That's what we're up against today.
wow, this wasn't where I thought the conversation was going today, but it's cool. I enjoy it. Scott, why don't you take a couple of minutes, introduce yourself, and share a little bit of your entrepreneurial journey, and how did you get into content marketing and marketing in general?
Well, my bachelor's degree was in mass communications, and I was one of those rare college students that never really changed his major. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And one of the things I really liked about that was there were a lot of avenues I could go in my career. In fact, I had this professor that had this poster on her door that said, "What can I do with a mass communications degree?" And it had all of these jobs, and it just filled out the rest of that poster. And I liked that. I liked the versatility of it. And it just kind of inevitably started in TV and video. And to date myself, you want to talk about evolving as a marketer? My class was the last class to do analog video editing. The next year got digital editing, and I had to teach myself that. So that's I've really had to evolve over the years. And really that's been the journey. I've always been very audience focused in my career, and that has been critical. That's allowed me to be able to work in a lot of different industries. It didn't take me long to get to know an industry or a brand, because as long as I got that audience or that consumer, I was able to evolve. And I just evolved with it. It all started with print. And then I got into radio. I did some not helped the NPR affiliate out here in Dallas with on-air fundraising, messaging, and content. And what's interesting about that job was really what kind of turned the tide as far as my focus as a marketer, because all of that messaging that has to emotionally resonate with fundraising now
Mm,
actually applies to for-profit fundraising in order for it, or fundraising for-profit businesses, because that's really the key today. So
mm,
I've just managed to apply that in all areas because it's all involving communication, whether it's copywriting, video, podcasting, social media. And I've been able to do it for a lot of different industries and organizations. But I've also had those experiences where some were willing to evolve with the times and others weren't. And when I started getting into almost a string of a lot of tough experiences for marketers or marketing departments that could not evolve. And I've seen the results of what happens both internally and externally with the business and the consumer when that's not happening. But I was always doing stuff on the side, helping businesses that did want to change, did want to
mm,
evolve, did want to figure out a path. So it just made sense after a while. Okay, I'm going to step out of the full-time roles and not just focus on that. Now I'm going to spend more time helping those who really want to differentiate themselves, evolve into modern marketing, and make a difference in our very challenging and competitive and overwhelming space.
mm. I always think of things that don't change die. And for me, the classic example is always Blockbuster.
Mm,
Who
yeah,
ever thought that Blockbuster would go under? And yet they refused to change with the times. Netflix was starting to come out and they're like, "Oh, that's not going to catch on." Well,
yeah,
within a few years, the company's gone, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good example. It's also an example of, too comfortable with your success right at that moment. There's a
Mhm.
long history of people and businesses that have done that. over the years as well. You have to be agile today, that's for sure. And that was just the start of things to come, I think, when it comes to evolving and seeing where things are going. The interesting thing is I've even worked for organizations that whose core messaging was telling other businesses, you have to evolve, you have to change with the times, and we can help you do that. But when it came to marketing, it was like, oh no, 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 that's not what we do. you know, which was always kind of interesting. The other thing that I think with Blockbuster and companies like that, it's also a little harder to evolve, even if you know it's better if you're profitable. You
Mm.
stop and think, well, we're making money. Why do we need to change anything? And I think the thing to remember there is, well, how much money are you leaving on the table? What doors have you not opened yet? The analogy I've used is it's like going on The Price is Right to win $10,000, and you jump up and down and run off stage after you win 100. you know, there's still so much more money you could have had. Don't be excited about winning 100. so that's there's a lot of things that can get in our own way as marketers when we know we should probably be doing something different or better.
I love it. Love it. And just, those little nuggets of truth. Your business has to grow, change, evolve. If it doesn't, you know, you just you fade out. We are going to switch gears in just a moment. Audience, we're going to take a short ad break. I want to encourage you. I have been developing some amazing resources, free resources for you. And you are going to hear about one of them. And then we'll be back to talk more about Sparketing. Welcome back. Scott, I am so enjoying today's conversation
Me
with you.
too.
I'd love to dive deeper actually into Sparketing and how does someone or an entrepreneur, like most of my audience is consultants, speakers, professionals, those types of people. How would they implement Sparketing into their businesses?
Well, I think the first thing is, I mean, it kind of really depends on where they are right now.
Mhm.
You have businesses that have not launched a social media presence or a content strategy or an email strategy. So implementing Sparketing is a little bit different there, because then we're going to be looking at opportunities to differentiate themselves in the space.
Mhm.
Because in all likelihood, their competition is still quote unquote marketing. So
Mm.
here's an opportunity by being a lot more consumer focused and evolving into these more modernized strategies that focus on, transparency and two-way communication, and be willing to open up channels of communication and take approaches to content that before we didn't, for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it was an obsession with the competition and, oh, we can't show that. We really can't have that attitude anymore. And when it comes to evolving, something that's existing, really, I think now, yeah, I mean, depending on the size of the organization, especially, but it's almost like you have to have a good communication, very people focused internal culture.
Mhm.
Because if you've got good humanized communication and a belief in what you're doing, and everybody's on the same page and what it takes to really help um, everybody in the business help their consumers, well, then you've already taken a good first step. Everybody knows that's the focus. And I think if you've got those things aligned internally, then it's going to be a lot easier to be able to communicate on good humanized emotional levels externally.
Mhm.
And, there's a combination between that and then being able to break out of some of the things, old content marketing strategies and
Yeah.
ideas that might have worked at one point in time, but really get in our way today, because consumers have seen everything now, and they all have experiences and they all have interpretations as to what you're doing. And we have to break those barriers down and give them a reason and proof that we're different and we're really there to help them and not just help ourselves. That's a very generalized term, but it also are set of terms and definitions. But I mean, if you're, you know, it really kind of depends on what your business is, whether you're B2B or B2C. But at the end of the day, you're still talking to a person. But it really is going to make a difference one way or another. We just have to kind of break it down based on your industry and audience.
A lot of my audience works in the B2B sector. So you mentioned content, and I think that's an area we can probably focus in on because, most of this audience probably don't have marketing teams and stuff like that. They're doing a lot of these things on their own. And
Yeah.
content is something that they can at least work on and control. So let's talk a little bit about content and what kind of content should they be creating right now?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of avenues, obviously, and it might depend on how your audience consumes content. I mean, one of the things that's been kind of nice as we've learned about social media and content over the years. Before it was like, let's just throw as much as we can out there and be on all platforms and do, to launch everything at once and just keep throwing stuff out there. And of course, now we live in a day and age where it's already overstuffed enough, and stuffing it with more isn't going to help us stand out. So, really, if you have opportunities to talk and put yourself in front of your audience. So if you're doing podcasting and video, whether on your social media channels, on your website, or through a podcast, kind of like what we're doing, that's a really good way to humanize your brand. People get to see
Mhm.
you, hear you, you get a chance to demonstrate your expertise, because sometimes, even in an email, when you are just pretty much putting all your eggs in that basket, you're hoping that however you wrote that email, how you wrote it and how your head is reading those words is how the consumer is going to read those words.
Yeah.
And that gets very, very tricky. Whereas if you are creating content where people can see or hear you, or even if you have just really good photos on your site that's really of you and your team instead of a bunch of stock photos sometimes, that can make a world of difference. When it comes to blogs, you got to do a lot more with blogs now. The good news is you don't have to produce 25 in a week because you're trying to rank. Now it's about spending more time on one or two and having elements of research and collaboration and things that really stand out.
Yeah.
So it's really, all those options are still out there. It's really about changing our approach, because the
Mhm.
consumers have seen all of the content that's out there that clearly communicates to them it's meant to help the business, when they're looking for something that is clearly developed to help them.
Yeah. You talked about emails, and there's been times I've had to write difficult emails, and I needed to make sure that the tone was good. So, a good friend, well, actually, my best friend, she's an editor, and she actually helped me in my company. She worked, but even before and after that, if I'm writing something and I need to make sure I nail the right tone, I always email it to her first and I get her to read it. So, audience, there's a little hint and tip there. If you've got to write difficult emails, get somebody else's perspective. One of the things that I've been working on, that was over the summer, was working with certain specialists to implement some new things in my business because I could not see the forest for the trees.
Mm.
It's not that I didn't know how to do these things. I can do them. I've taught them. I've helped other people in them. But I realized in my own business, I couldn't see. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I couldn't see the forest for the trees. And so I spent a lot of time this summer working with specialists to get a whole new perspective on my business, on developing out certain pieces like free resources,
Hmm.
videos, developing new products. I've had them speaking with my clients so that they can get another perspective on it. And yeah, sometimes you have to do that in your business. Like, I mean, I've studied marketing for 20 years. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
not a marketer as per se, but marketing fascinates me, so I
Yeah.
study it, right? And so there's not too many marketing concepts that I at least don't have a good semi-working understanding of. But when you've got to apply it to your own business,
Yeah. I mean, I've had a similar journey. And it's interesting. I just came from content marketing world, and I actually went to a session that focused on, marketing yourself. There's a lot of people that are looking for jobs today, especially in the marketing space, and it was all focused on, how to network and the challenges we face. And I thought it was a great observation to say that, we spend all of our lives, if you've worked that full-time job, um, you've developed all the right strategies to market other people and businesses, and then for some reason it gets really tough to get out of the mindset of promoting a business or developing content for a business and then have to apply that to yourself. And this has actually been a 2-year journey for me, even to get to where I am now. I should have had a montage of the different variations my website has taken in the last 2 years. It was like, oh my gosh, what is he now? It's true. But I had to, and I'd say I'm still kind of fine tuning some of it, because when I pitched myself for full time jobs, the thing was, well, I'm kind of a content specialist.
Mhm.
I can apply these beneficial and powerful things to all types of content. And I almost, when I first started, tried to promote myself the exact same way. Say, I can help you do this in anything. The problem is, it's really not focused enough for someone who really needs a specific thing. Plus, there's a lot of people that offer that sort of stuff. So I had to go in and figure out, okay, instead of saying I can do all this stuff, what has been the number one thing that was key to success in all of those jobs, even if it was in different types of content industries and copy and all that stuff? What is that number? What was the differentiator? What was the thing that I brought to the table that was unique? And it took me a while to kind of break that down in a way that was easy, but it really was communication. It went back to communication. I knew how to get in the shoes or the hearts and minds of the consumer and figure out ways to write and produce things that was going to that would connect with them in a meaningful and impactful way. And then I had to come up with, all right, how do I say that? And how do I say it in a way that people care? Because, communication consultant isn't going to excite anybody.
No.
So it's been a journey, but I think it's healthy. I talk to business people that have gone through very similar journeys, and at the end of the day, it's just part of it, and it's okay to get things wrong and experiment along the way until you figure it out. And then once you figure it out, you're on your way and you're glad you fought through it.
When you were talking about that, um, one of the things I did, and you'll see if you're watching this on the video, beside my name, it says the extraordinary word ninja. Now, there was two reasons for that. First, it caused me to stand out, but actually, there's three things. The second thing was everyone goes, "What's a word ninja?"
Hmm.
Third, they won't remember my name, but they'll remember that I'm the word ninja.
Right.
So, um, I think you need to call yourself a Sparketing specialist.
Yeah.
Scott Murray, the I can't say it today. Anyway, because I think that would create curiosity. People are like, "What's Sparketing?" Right? Like,
Yeah.
and then when you explain it, they're like, "Oh, that's a oh, okay, audience,
It's all
the
right, Kim.
mouth
I'm
is
right with you.
not working today."
It's
Um,
okay. I'm with you.
um, that would help to differentiate yourself, and it would stand out.
Yeah, I that's something I'm working into. It Sparketing was actually part of the early part of my journey, as I was developing this, but it was just kind of a side note thing. And I think part of it was because I was trying to figure out if it was just too different, if people would, really be intrigued by it or go, well, that sounds kind of silly, which it does in a way. But when you find out what it is, then it makes sense. And then it's not such a bad idea. And by the way, I've always told people, if the idea itself is just to get away from that mental block that the word marketing creates, where we think like marketers, sell and promote, which already puts us at a disadvantage. You don't have to call it sparketing. There might be something in your business culture that is a different word than marketing that's better than sparketing. Perfectly okay. That's it's not going to offend me at all. It's the idea, it's the principle behind it. The first thing I came up with that's very similar to Word Ninja was, and this is actually in how I'm listed in the book, is communication craftsman, because I was always developing the right words and scripts and things for content that were actually making a difference, and that was a way that I could brand it. But yeah, now Sparketing, now that feels like part of Sparketing. So I am working through that still, but they're both associated, because what I say is Sparketing means that it's basically a philosophy of modern marketing that focuses on two vital components: communication and the consumer. So those are, they're related, but I will be completely honest with you, I'm still kind of working around the edges for kind of laying it out as how that relates to me. I'm still on that journey, but I'm in a lot better place than I was now. We had this interview 2 years ago. Uh, who knows what I would have been saying? It would have been a lot of the same things. It just wouldn't be nearly as concise, and some of the terminology might be different, but I would have still been talking about communication and consumers.
Scott, I'm so glad you said that because I've been a publisher for, well, officially 7 years, but I've been ghostwriting for 8 years.
Oh,
And it has been an evolution. It has been a process. Um, even coming up with author to authority, that took quite a bit of time.
I'm
And
sure.
and just in the last actually couple, well, okay, audience for you, because we're recording this in October, you're going to be listening to this in November. So this would have been September, back in September. Um, I had a major sort of epiphany, breakthrough, moment of genius in terms of explaining the business. It's going to become my keynote speech. Like, it was just this massive, and I'm 8 years in. And sometimes these things take time to develop. The extraordinary word ninja didn't come overnight. That took almost
Yeah.
a year.
Yeah.
That it took almost a year for me to find that right title that I could own, that I
Yeah.
could just really own and dig into and use and feel comfortable with. So, audience, these things don't always happen overnight.
And
Sometimes it
that's
happens
okay.
over years.
Yeah, and that's okay, because the thing, and I'll be honest with you, I've had moments where I thought, I'm not going to figure this out, or people, people aren't going to care about this, all that, that imposter syndrome that's so prevalent. But the thing that kept me driving towards it was, I know I've already proven to myself that I can help people, and I believe in my
Mm.
genuine passion to learn and then go help those who haven't had a chance to tap into some of these things. I have a genuine passion for that, and I know that the struggle is just part of the journey. I'm a big Phoenix Suns fan, and their former coach used to say that all your hopes and dreams are on the other side of hard. And I know that when I reach the point where I'm trying to be, I'm going to look back on all these struggles and go, "Whew, I am so glad I didn't give up on this, because look where I am today." And I even had this, you talk about your journey, especially as it relates to content. I just changed my podcast. I just, and this was tough because I've been podcasting since 2011, and I've only had to change the name of the show once, and that was my very first show because I messed that up. But this time, when I launched my personal brand and decided to do this on my own, I had an interview show, and then I had this like mini podcast where I would highlight insights from around the web and have a chance to talk about it and highlight other people, other sparketers, as I would say. Um, and I just felt like, I'm not doing enough that's different.
Mm.
Because that's been a big thing that I've been able to do with content, is really kind of differentiate, put a creative spin on it to help the organization stand out. And I'm like, why can't I do that with the marketing podcast? And now I have the Sparketing podcast, which is only 4 episodes in, and it's a completely different format. It's 3 segments. It's a lot more, it's got a lot more voices in it and creativity in it. And I could sit here and kick myself and go, why didn't I just do that in the first place? Especially since I was already thinking about Sparketing. But I look back on it and I'm like, well, but you know what? The only way, and I love doing this show now versus, and I like doing the other show, but I love doing this one. And I look back on it and I'm like, the Sparketer podcast would not exist had I not done that other stuff first, because doing
Yeah.
those 2 shows led me to this one. So I don't look back on the old thing as a mistake. It was just part of the journey.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Scott. We're going to shift gears here because we got about 5 minutes left. And you are a contributing author to the most amazing marketing book ever. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So first of all, just give a quick introduction to the book, and then I'm going to ask you the question I ask every single author who comes on the show.
All right. Well, yeah, it's an amazing feat. First off, it's 36 different authors led by Mark Schaefer, who is a best-selling author of many great books, important books like Marketing Rebellion and Belonging to the Brand. So it was a great opportunity to be able to work with him on this. We're all kind of part of Mark's community of experts, and there was this idea that said, what if we all got together and had a group of us make a book, and we follow this format that's easy for people to read? So each chapter is built the same way. They all have 10 takeaways per chapter, and every single person is focused on an element of their expertise. And it's well, laid out. It's very methodical in how it's laid out, but you get those 10 takeaways every single chapter, which is great, because I'm sure this is true of me, and I'm sure it's true of you, Kim. I've read a marketing book, closed, and thought, what did I come away with? What did I come away with in this book? So it's nice to have those things. Um, and even all those authors, a lot of them, like myself, we were first time authors. This was our first opportunity to be able to do this. And we all also recorded our audio for our chapters. And I don't think Amazon's ever had an audiobook with 36 voices from all over the world contributing to one book. And, it was a challenge to get all that coordinated. And my chapter is on consumer behavior. So it's really kind of demonstrating just how consumers are changing our marketing era and what that means for marketers. And I thought that was a good place to go, because you could at least take that and have that in the back of your mind as you go through the other chapters, as other people are teaching you how to do other things in marketing.
Nice, nice. So, Scott, because you only did a chapter, I know you won't be able to fully answer this question, but what was the good, the bad, and the ugly of having that chapter in that book?
Well, um, I wouldn't say it's bad or ugly. It seemed like it could get ugly, because we're like, how are we going to get all these people together, coordinate an effort, get everything edited? There was people who had never recorded audio. They didn't have equipment yet, and they were going to have to voice a chapter, and it was going to have to be approved by Amazon. And actually, the first time we submitted to Amazon, there were still things we needed to change. And how we're going to meet all the deadlines, and how we're going to, organize everything that's related to the book, but have 36 people in the process, plus people on the back end. But we did it, and we met all of the deadlines, and it's out. I mean, that in itself is definitely the good.
Mhm.
Um, and I think some of those challenges you might have even thought might could maybe fit the bad part of it. But the good news is the bad and the ugly, or the more challenging, chaotic components of it. As we were just saying, Kim, part of the journey, it didn't stop us. And now we can look back on it and say, we're so glad we fought through the bad and the ugly, because now the book is out and everybody can be proud of it. And it really can help a lot of people, because, we've already been fortunate enough to have a lot of really good positive reviews on Amazon. So I'm just glad that after all of that, it's something that the group can be proud of, because we know we did it from a place of where we were trying to make it easy for people to have kind of a reference book for marketing. And I'm so glad Mark was able to coordinate all of this and help us noobs in the process, and made it happen.
Yeah, one of the things we do at RTA Publishing is we manage those projects to create those types of books.
Yeah,
Actually, we do a lot more than that, but one of the things we do is manage those product projects, and it is when you've got so many people, like, the biggest part is managing it to get it done in a timely
yeah,
fashion, especially
yeah.
with people who have never written a chapter before. So I hear you. I hear you. Well, we are out of time, Scott. So I would love for you, you've got about 30 seconds to give a final thought and then share how people can connect with you if they've really enjoyed today's episode.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and your audience about Sparketing today. So thank you so much for having me here. My closing thought is, you know, there are a lot of really powerful ways you can differentiate yourself today, even though it's overwhelming, part of the journey, even though it's overwhelming, even though there's a lot of clutter out there, and even though it may feel like you can't go out there and really connect with people, you can. You just have to be willing to kind of think about marketing in a different way. And if you start with the consumer in a way to connect with them in a meaningful way, you're already off to a good start. And I talk about that on my site, which is scottmurrayonline.com. And my podcast actually just launched its own website, which is sparketerpodcast.com. And there's a lot of great voices on that show, people who I would call sparketers, a lot of the experts you've probably heard. And you really get a lot of insights in one show. And I try to keep it at an hour or less. And you hear lots of different voices and insights about modern marketing. And I hope you have a chance to give it a listen. And by all means, tell me what you think.
That is awesome, Scott. If you've enjoyed this episode, then I would love for you, if you're on YouTube, check out the thumbnail here on the screen. And you can go back, if you're on the podcast app, just a couple of episodes back to Bruce Shear, who is actually also in the Most Amazing Marketer book. And Bruce talks about your book as a targeted marketing tool. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you on the very next episode. Bye now.